All right, video 2 of 2. Welcome back to another episode of How Many Tabs Are Open on Mr. Johnson's computer. Obviously, I uploaded that last one, so we got some more tabs. We got 2, 4, 6, 7 tabs. 2 more tabs in just a few minutes. That's a problem. All right, so let's open up another tab. Haha. Now that's 8. I can count. I'm a math teacher. All right, so what we're going to look at is this Google assignment. I'm guessing it's going to have to do with additive and multiplicative rules. Oh, look at that. So we're trying to figure out, is it a multiplicative rule or an additive rule? And the best way to do that is we are going to take this graph, make it into a table. And that looks like what we're going to do for all of these. Okay, so we talked about this yesterday in class. Sometimes they'll give you a table and it'll be filled out and they'll say, take this table and put it on a graph. Remember, graphs and tables show the exact same information in 2 different ways. A table shows it with numbers. A graph shows it with a pattern. If you have the numbers in the table, yeah, you can figure out what's going on. But if you see it on a graph, you can tell, oh, this is going up. This graph is going up. If we drew an arrow, it would be going, wait for y'all, yeah, this way, right? So that is going up. So that means as your x gets bigger, your y also gets bigger. Okay, and these are additive or multiplicative rules most of the time because you don't know negative numbers yet, so you won't have your arrow going different directions yet. Okay, so fill in the table of x and y locations for each colored point. What is the rule? This is basically going to be that game of Battleship. All right, so we got to look at our scale. Here it looks like our scale is halves because it takes 2 jumps to get to 1, 2 jumps to get to 2, 2 more jumps to get to 3. So this looks like 5 tenths, 1, 1 and 5 tenths, 2, 2 and 5 tenths, 3, or otherwise half, 1, 1 and a half, 2, 2 and a half, 3. All right? So just remember 5 tenths is a half. So if I'm going to run on this line and then jump here, how many did I run and how many did I jump? So if you said you ran half, you are correct. If you said you ran 1, look, 1 is over here. So that means this one, like when we go just one line, that's a half. If this did say 1, you'd be absolutely correct. But on this one, 1 is over here, 2 is over here. So each has a half step between. So we ran a half step. So we ran 5 tenths. All right, if you want to write it as 0 and 5 tenths, that is absolutely correct as well. So we ran 5 tenths. And then how much did we jump? We jumped 5 tenths and 1. So we jumped a whole 1. All right, so we ran half. We jumped 1. So that's why we wrote half as 5 tenths. And then on our y, we had 1. So as you can see, we've taken the information from the graph and put it on the table. So by the time we finish with these two, our table will be complete. And then we can find a rule because we already know how to find a rule with a table. That's what we did in our previous lesson today. So if you haven't done the discussion yet, go back and do the discussion because the discussion will show you how to find the rule on a table. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to find out this green point. This green point lives at, we ran 1, so our x is 1. And then we jumped 2, so our y is 2. So remember, that's an ordered pair. Like these ordered pairs would basically look like this. If you were going to see these without the table, it would just look like that. That's an ordered pair. If you were just going to see this one, it would be parentheses 1, comma 2. So those are ordered pairs. Ordered pairs go on the table. You can graph ordered pairs. All right. And that's what we're doing. In fact, like if we wanted to label our points, you could label the point on the graph like that with the ordered pair, which is the location or the coordinates of where it is. All right. Finally, let's check this one out. We're looking for the blue dots. So we ran half, 1, 1 and a half. So it looks like we ran 1 and a half. And then how many did we jump? We ran half, 1, half, 2, half, 3. So we jumped 3. So once again, our ordered pair for this would be parentheses 1 and 5 tenths, comma 3. I guess I could separate those even more just so they don't get confusing. But the comma separates the two numbers. So your x is on the left side, your right is on the y, or your y is on the right side. All right. Another thing to remember with this is your x is your input, your y is your output. So when we make a rule, it's going to be either adding to x or multiplying times x to get y. As you can see, both of these, y is alone. Like we talked about in the last video, y, your output, is alone. It wants to be that way, maybe. It's like an introvert. It's like COVID was for me. I never had to leave the house. X always has a friend. X is adding to a friend. X is multiplying with a friend. It's just, it always has a friend. Y is alone. All right. In the future, like middle school, high school, you might see it differently. But in fifth grade, Y is a loner. All right. It's a loner dotty, a rebel. And X has a friend. Okay. So is this an additive rule or a multiplicative rule? Let's figure it out. 5/10 turns into 1. Either we can multiply by 2 or we can add 5/10. All right? Because 5/10 plus, uh, plus 5/10, sorry, is 1, or 5/10 times 2, 2 times 5 is 10, we have one decimal place, is 1. So our rule can either be on this, add 5/10 or multiply times 2. All right, so it already looks like the adding rule that they gave us doesn't look that great. So let's take a look. If I add, plug in 1 for x, so y equals x plus 2. If I plug in 1 for x, y equals 1 plus 2, y equals 3, but this says y equals 2. So I don't think their adding rule works. Let's look at y equals 2x. Remember, that's y equals 2 times whatever the number is. Our number was 1, so we're going to do 2 times 1, and y equals 2, which does check out. So it looks like our rule is multiply by 2, but let's just check with our last piece of information. So y equals 2x, and then what we're going to say is y equals, and what we're going to do is we're going to replace the x with the number for x. Our last number for x is 1 5/10. So if you're like, I can't do that in my head, that is totally fine. 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. We have one decimal place. So y is equal to 3, or 3 0/10. Is that true? Yes, it is. So we need to take this check mark and move it next to, move it next to the multiplicative rule, because we figured out that 2x's, if you double this, it equals 1. If you double 1, it equals 2. If you double 1 5/10, it equals 3. So our rule was multiplicative. So when you're given a graph and no rule, turn the graph into a table, because we know how to find a rule with the table. Finding the rule with the graph is a little bit harder. So if they give you a graph and say find the rule, put it on a table. And you can make your table by yourself. All you have to do is just draw like the little tables I'm drawing on OneNote. So let's take another look. Let's do this one. All right, so we have two rules that it could be multiplicative, 1x, so whatever x is times 1, or we're adding to x. We're adding 1 to x. So the first thing, what do we need to do? Fill out this blank table. So let's take the dots and put their locations on the table. The red dot, once again, our scale is halves because we have half spaces. So we run half, we jump 1 1/2. So we ran 5/10, we jumped 1 5/10. All right, the next one, we ran for green. We ran 1. We jumped 2. Okay, this is the same info. No, it's a little different. Okay, and then the last one, we ran 1 1/2, and we jumped 2 1/2. So we ran 1 1/2 and jumped 2 1/2. So, okay, now we got to find this rule. Is it multiplying by 1 or is it adding 1? So if I multiply 5/10 times 1, I get 5/10. If I multiply 1 times 1, I get 1. If I multiply 1 5/10 times 1, I get 1 5/10. Did we get any of those answers? Doesn't look like it. What if I add 1 to 5/10? If you added $1 to 50 cents, you'd have $1.50. What if I add 1 to 1? So take this 1 and plug it in for x. Y equals 1 plus 1. Y equals 2. So this additive rule is checking out because of the fact that it's what we're doing to our x column. We're taking our x column and we're adding 1 to it, and that gives us our y column. So 1 and 5/10 plus 1 equals 2 and 5/10. 5/10 plus 1 equals 1 and 5/10. 1 plus 1 equals 2. So the additive rule is what worked on this table, because multiplying by 1, our x value and our y value would have been the same every time. So we would have run 1, jumped 1, run 2, jump 2, but that is not what happened on this table. So we have one more to look at. Okay, so we're going to put these on the graph. Same scale, we're moving by halves. This one starts on that very special place on the graph. Remember that this special place on the graph is called the origin, and the origin is at 0, 0. Okay, so this is a great review of origin. Okay, and also maybe I should have reviewed this just because it's been a week, but this is your y-axis, and this is your x-axis. That's why we're graphing the x number on our run and our y number on our jump. So let's try this out. We obviously cannot find our rule from our first piece of data because 0 and 0. I can either add 0 or I can multiply times 1. So that's going to be a weird one. So let's not try and find a rule with an origin. All right, that means we're going to have to try really hard to find a rule with our two other spots. All right, so let's take a look. We have 1 and half. Okay, so we ran 1 and then we jumped a half. We ran 1 on the x-axis, we jumped a half on the y-axis. We did not jump 1, 1 is here, we're halfway between. So let's take a look at the blue dot. We run on our x-axis 1, 2, and then we jumped to the 1. So we ran 2, we jumped 1. All right, so we need to figure out what our rule is, okay? And this one's a little bit tricky, all right? So remember, when you multiply by less than 1, your number can get smaller. All right, so on this one, we know it's not an additive rule because we can't add a positive number and get a smaller number. I can't add a positive number to 2 and get 1. So we know there's no possible way that we're adding a half. 0 plus half is half. 1 plus half is 1.5. 2 plus half is 2.5. So this additive rule just won't work. So let me show you why the multiplicative rule works. All right, because some of y'all might have forgotten, it's been a while, and that's totally fine. But we have 5/10 x. Okay, so let's go ahead and start plugging these numbers in. We won't use 0 because obviously 0 times anything is 0, right? But we can start with 1. So we're going to do 5/10 times whatever x is, right? So 1 times 5/10, if we just do the math over here, 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 0 is 0, 1 decimal place. So anything times 1 is itself, so obviously 1 was 5/10. 5/10 times 1 was 5/10. So, so far this checks out with our rule. And I know you're saying you're multiplying and getting smaller, but remember, we're multiplying by less than 1. When you multiply by 0, the number shrinks to 0. When you multiply by 1, the number stays itself. So if you multiply by less than 1, the number should be somewhere between 0 and the number itself. And then finally, we're going to do 2 as our x, so let's use the same formula. Y is equal to 5/10 times x. Y is equal to 5/10 times 2. And if we have to do 5/10 times 2 over here on the side, that's fine. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry the 1. 2 times 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. So we have 1 decimal place, 1 decimal place. So 5/10 times 2 is 1. And that's exactly what we got. So our rule on this last one is multiplicative. All right. I know it can be kind of tricky when you're multiplying by less than 1. So just remember, if you're multiplying by less than 1, you can get smaller numbers. It's one trick in multiplication that blew my mind when I was young. It was like, wait, multiplying means getting bigger. And someone was like, yes, except for when you multiply times 0, what happens? And I was like, you get 0. So you're like, so you've known that you can multiply and get smaller your whole life. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then it kind of clicked. Okay, if a decimal is between 0 and 1, then my number should be somewhere between multiplying times 0 or multiplying times 1. All right. So that should be it. So if you have any questions, please do ask your teachers. I know that this is a lot of new stuff. So just remember, like you cannot you one day, like when you're older, you'll be able to find rules from just looking at graphs. But right now, put the graph on a table. All right, put the graph on a table because we can definitely find rules by putting them on tables because we've been doing input out machines since like second or third grade. All right, so I hope that this is making more and more sense as we go through it. If you have any questions, ask your teachers. Feel free to like and subscribe if you want to. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And I will talk to y'all soon. So see you later. Bye.